Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've already been here before. This is meandepiphany, where we talk about science, philosophy, religion, history, and everything in between. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. As always, I put the links to the resources in the description box. You can find meandepiphany content on Instagram, Facebook, Rumble, TikTok, Reddit, and Quora. It takes a lot of work reading or watching source material and compiling all the information for you. I'm hoping to teach full time because the end is near. This information needs to get out, and I hope you're learning something. A lot of this information has come full circle, especially if you've been watching my videos from the beginning or followed me on IG. A lot of dots have been connected that I had no idea even dealt with one another. So thank you for coming on this journey with me. If you want to support the channel, Cashapp is meandepiphany and PayPal is meandepiphany@gmail.com. For all my nature lovers out there, I do have an online store called LifeByOrtavia. I take photographs of flowers, the sky, different scenes in nature, and I create bags and wallets and phone cases and things like that out of them. So if you want to check that out, definitely go to my website. It's called LifeByOrtavia. And now for today's lesson. Have you ever thought, what if we're not moving? Or why can't I feel the spin? That's one of the questions that we are going to try to answer today. So I just want you to think, just based off what you know, based off what you've seen, what you observe yourself, whether or not you believe you are a heliocentrist or a geocentrist. Since the beginning of time, early men viewed the world as geocentric. That means that the Earth is the center of the universe, and the sun, moon, stars, and planets are moving in a circuit above. The Earth does not move. It wasn't until Greek civilization 500 years before Christ that scientists questioned the authenticity of geocentric claims and suggested that the universe was heliocentric, meaning the sun is the center, and the Earth, moon, stars, and planets are in orbit around it. Astronomy in Greece wanted to advance a non-theistic view of the universe, yet could not explain the observable phenomena. The latter model was never fully accepted because it could not explain why relative positions of the stars changed despite Earth's changing viewpoints. The sun looks to rise and set in the sky. Our horizontal coordinate system allows the observer to see a visible horizon and elevation from that to the zenith at a 90-degree angle. Altitudes above the horizon are in the upper hemisphere, and below that is the lower hemisphere. This was footage I obtained while on a cruise in the Gulf of Mexico. This is a clear-cut horizon. As you can see, it's straight in front. There's no lines going either way, just out into the distance, and you see the sun coming over the horizon, going in the upward motion as if it's elevating. And this is even with the supposed rotation of the Earth. You can still see the sun moving upward. The entire sunrise is on my channel. It's called Sunrise in the Gulf of Mexico. Job 26:7 says, "He stretches out the north over the empty place and hangs the earth upon nothing." Nothing means formlessness, confusion, and unreality. Not anything. Scientists didn't learn this until 1650. The north points towards the direction of the Lord's abode, above the heavens and above the earth. It comes from the Hebrew word saphon, meaning hidden, obscure, and dark, from the primitive root sapon, meaning inaccessible. God calls this place Mount Zion. The name Zion means parched place, with the description of a sunny place or a sunny mountain. It is also called the joy of the whole world and the city of the great king. Psalms 48:2. In Babylonian astronomy, the Canaanites called it Mount Zaphon, a place where they believed the council of gods reside. They believe the universe is 6 levels with 3 heavens. The topmost, heaven of stars, is where the gods communicate from. Isaiah 14:13 recounts Lucifer wanting to reach above this height. The constellations and planets change, showing in different months of the year. For example, in October, the constellation Aquarius is visible to the naked eye, and Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune with binoculars. With Aquarius, those in the northern hemisphere see it in the southern sky, and those in the southern hemisphere see it in the northern sky. In July, Mercury, Venus, Uranus, Mars, Neptune, and Saturn can be seen as dawn approaches, as well as the constellations of Taurus, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, and Capricornus. The North Star, known as Polaris, is a 1 degree away from the North Pole. It is a stable star and visible with the naked eye at night, making it a very successful tool for navigating. In Lakota, it's called the star that sits still. All other stars appear to rotate around it. The Babylonians noted the planets were the brightest, and these planets such as Marduk, who is also Jupiter, and Venus, who is Ishtar, had messages for them. They observed an exact science in analyzing the position of the same stars and planets at different times of the year in different places. One such record is the Mullipen, constructed in early 1000 BC, which listed the stars and classified them into constellations. The constellations of Pleiades, Orion, Arcturus mentioned in Scripture are called the same today. The science was based on their census and record keeping on tablets dating back to 3800 BC. According to Babylonia and Egypt, the universe was Earth-centered, unmovable, and steady. The group was the first to identify solstices and equinoxes caused by the sun's movement. According to the American Heritage Dictionary, a solstice is either of the 2 times of the year when the sun is at its greatest angular distance from the celestial equator. The summer solstice is in the northern hemisphere. It occurs June 21st when the sun is at the zenith on the Tropic of Cancer. The winter solstice occurs about December 21st when the sun is at the zenith on the Tropic of Capricorn. The summer solstice is the longest day of the year. The winter solstice is the shortest. This is its definition in astronomy: the time at which the sun is at its greatest distance from the equator, and when its diurnal motion, meaning it occurs during the day, when its diurnal motion and declination ceases, which happens about June 21st when it enters Cancer, and about December 22nd when it enters Capricorn, the winter solstice. Even this dictionary implies that the sun is in motion. Equinoxes are the day that the sun crosses the equator, making the length of day equal to the length of night. The spring equinox is March 21st, and the fall equinox is September 22nd. Stars also revolved around Earth once a day, never changing their pattern. The movement of the sun and moon led to creation of calendars for agricultural purposes. The perfection of its mathematical equations caused believers to give it ritual significance and use it in making altars and cathedrals. Nowhere in the Bible does it speak of the movement of the earth, but makes many mention of the sun moving. It states that the heavens declare the glory of God, and there is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their line goes out from earth, their words to the end of the earth. Line is the Hebrew word kav, referring to a measuring cord or rule. The primitive root of this word is kavah, meaning to wait, look for, hope, and expect. He set a tabernacle for the sun, Psalms 19:4. Tabernacle is defined as a nomad's tent of a transient nature, the state of lasting only for a short period. The sun is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. Circuit means coming around or revolution. Matthew 5:45 says, that ye may be children of your Father which is in heaven. He makes his sun to rise on evil and on good, and send rain on the just and unjust. The word rise means up into the mist. When the Bible speaks of the sun setting, the description is that of entering a house. According to the book of Enoch, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west through a series of 6 portals. It has a circumference, which is the heaven, and is the same size as the moon, although brighter. It states the chariot on which he ascends, the wind drives. He rests not, but runs day and night.
Something to you really quick, just in case you didn't understand it, because it's really simple. Now, here as you can see the flat earth map, you guys are familiar with this. Now you know the summer solstice, the sun is making its small circuit around the north. And it works its way back out into the fall, back out to the winter solstice, which is on its longer circuit. Okay, now, just in case you didn't understand what the portals meant, I'm going to explain it really quick. Now here I have drawn a rough draft, because I don't want to draw on my map. So let me explain this really quick. Okay, you have your North Pole here, and you have your South, which is the southern ice wall. Okay, now in the book of Enoch, when it says that the sun goes from the second portal into the first portal into the second, and then from the second into the third, well, it's really simple. All the portals basically are, or what they stand for, you got to remember they're talking in ancient times. So in the winter, the sun starts to move in, which is coming into the spring. So month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6. Half of the year, it goes from the winter into the spring, then into the summer. That's 6 months. It takes it 6 months to get to its inner circuit. Okay, and then when you hear it reversed in the book of Enoch, when it says then the sun has made its circuit, and it goes from portal 6 back to portal 5, and then from portal 5 back to portal 4, and then the nights get longer. The nights start getting longer because the sun is moving back out up into a ball. Well, guess what? This ice ring becomes a white continent on the other side of this piece of paper. That's what they ingeniously done. They're not stupid, they're smart. They know exactly what they're doing. They're manipulating you.
Indian astronomy early on is quoted as saying, the sun never really sets or rises, in that they think of him, his setting, having reached the end of the day. He inverts himself, thus he makes evening below and day above. Again, in that they think of him, he is rising in the morning, having reached the end of the night, he inverts himself, thus makes day below and night above. He never sets. Indeed, he never sets. They describe the earth as circular round, as in a turtle shell. Genesis 1:9-10 states, And God said, Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called the seas. And God saw it was good. So there was water above the firmament and below, and the firmament, which was like a molten glass, he called heaven. He spread the expanse, or tent, for the sun, moon, stars, and fowl. And God put a circle on the face of the deep. He says he compassed the waters with bounds until day and night ends. Compass means to encircle. God says he gave the decree that the waters would not go beyond his commandment, and that the foundations of the earth were appointed to do that. Proverbs 8:29. Land, called dry ground or earth, means without moisture and dry-footed, the opposite of the sea. Every reference to the dry land from Genesis to Psalms recalls how God made the path of dry ground through the Red Sea for the children of Israel when they were escaping Pharaoh in the land of Egypt. Job 38:4-6 says, "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it?" Verse 6 finishes by saying, "Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who hath laid the cornerstone thereof?" The Bible says this foundation of earth is on pillars so that it would not move. 1 Samuel 2:8. Pillars mean molten support, having liquefied by high heat and solidified, from the primitive root to constrain. Job 26:7. And the world shall be established that it cannot move. Psalms 96:10. To be moved is to toddle, shake, slip, or move unsteadily. In the Oxford Dictionary, the word means wobble, tumble, toddle, sway, and oscillate. Let's hear what the Learning Junction has to say about how the Earth rotates on an axis and revolves around the sun.
Globe. A globe is a spherical model of Earth's. In reality, the Earth moves so fast that you don't even feel it. Let me explain this to you. You've drawn a beautiful diagram. Now draw the axis. The Earth's axis is an imaginary line joining the North Pole and the South Pole. Look here on the globe. The Earth spins around the axis. The spinning of the Earth around the axis is called rotation. It takes the Earth 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4.09 seconds, or 1 day, to make one complete rotation. Let's assume this globe as Earth and consider this lamp as sun. Now look closely. The light is falling only on one side. This is day. Now look at the other part and you can see it's dark. This is night.
I think I heard Black Twitter say, "Don't trust him if they ain't got no neck." According to NASA, not only does the Earth's axis wobble, but Earth's entire orbital ellipse also wobbles irregularly due to the interactions with Jupiter and Saturn. They also state the Earth oscillates between 22.1 and 24.5 degrees on a 41,000-year cycle, then it changes direction. In 2023, science journals began publishing that not only has Earth's core slowed down, it has actually stopped spinning. If the Earth changes direction, the deserts vanish and end up in places like North America, and rainforest areas turn into sand dunes in Central America and the Middle East. The temperature of Earth changes as well as the change in the length of day. According to NASA, dust, gas, and rock swirled around and collided until the Earth was formed. When researching the origins of the components, it was found that dust forms when rock breaks down. All rock starts as magma. Magma forms when rocks from the outermost of the Earth's crust melt. So without Earth's crust, there would be no magma, and without magma, there would be no rocks. And if there was no rock, then it doesn't break down to form dust, which swirls around with gas and the non-existent rock to form the Earth. That begs the question of how the Earth was formed. Yet, according to the science of heliocentrism, Earth has several layers and a metal core that turns. The liquid metal center spontaneously formed into a 4,200-mile ball roughly the size of the moon. Essentially, the theory is that Earth is a giant magnet. It has both a north and south pole with opposite charges. What causes the Earth's core to turn, there is no explanation, but nonetheless causes the Earth to turn in space approximately 1,000 miles per hour and 1,670 miles per hour at the equator. The spin plus gravity results in the Earth's magnetic field. This magnetic field is actually what the Bible calls the firmament. I talk about this in my video, There's a Dome Above Us, and rainbows prove it. They believe the spin is also the cause for the sun appearing to rise and set. Here's Malcolm Bowden talking about the geocentric view of how the sun goes around the Earth.
When two bodies circle one another, they actually circle around a point somewhere on the line joining their centers. This is known as the barycenter, and its position along that line depends upon their relative weights. If, say, one body is twice the weight of the other, then the barycenter will be 1/3 of the distance along the line from the larger body. With our planetary system, if we consider just the huge Sun and the Earth, which is minute in comparison to the Sun, then in the heliocentric model, the barycenter is only slightly displaced from the center of the Sun. This raises the question, in the geocentric model, how can the huge Sun circle the tiny Earth? Before we deal with this, we will show that we have a clear example on this Earth of a circular movement that has nothing at the center to hold it. In the heliocentric model, the Earth is rotating once per day in an anti-clockwise direction, and the Earth's atmosphere rotates with it. Air at the equator travels with the Earth at 0.46 kilometers per second. When an area of low pressure develops in the northern hemisphere, the air at the equator moves north to fill it. As the air moves to a higher latitude, its circumference is smaller, so the air has to start to move around the Earth anti-clockwise to maintain its rotational speed of 0.46 kilometers per second. Similarly, the air near the North Pole has little rotational speed, so as it moves to a lower latitude, which has a larger circumference, it must slow down and move to its right to keep the same rotational energy it started with. These two flow patterns combine to produce the well-known cyclone of rotating winds. Now notice carefully what is happening. We have here a huge mass of air that is rotating around a center, yet there is no central body that is attracting it. This circular movement is entirely due to what are called Coriolis forces that automatically produce these circular motions seemingly from nowhere. There is nothing at the center that is holding it there. This is an important aspect of these Coriolis forces. Now, in the heliocentric model, they are called fictitious forces because they only appear to be forces that change the direction of the moving portion of air. In the geocentric model, these movements are produced by the rotation of the huge mass of stars around the Earth, and they are real forces, not fictitious forces.
Again, the notion of heliocentrism was not held by a majority of scientists. It built itself through a series of radical ideas over time. Thales of Miletos, roughly 545 BC, still believed the Earth was at the center, was flat, and floating in water. Philosopher Animexes, 528 BC, posited that the stars are attached to a transparent crystal sphere rotating around the Earth. However, Pythagoras of Samos, Greece, 500 to 428 BC, is credited with discovering the sphericity of the Earth. He assumed because the moon was a sphere, Earth must be also. Believing in the harmony of spheres, which maintain that planets and stars move according to mathematical equations, which themselves correspond to musical notes and produce an inaudible symphony. Pythagoreans believed mathematics were the principles of all things and numbers make all things. Pythagoras was known as a religious magi who practiced divination and prophecy, specifically a practice called smoke trapping, lighting a fire in an enclosed space like a cave until noxious flames filled the room. Inhaling the flames caused hallucinations because oxygen deprivation and hypercapnia, which is too much carbon dioxide. Geometric shapes and patterns would appear and they would analyze them. The most mystical shape is the tetractys, a triangular figure. 10 points arranged in 4 rows, 1 in the first, 2 in the second, 3 in the third, and 4 in the fourth. Initiates into Pythagoreanism would swear a secret oath to the tetractys. Illuminati founder Adam Weishaupt wrote a book, Pythagoras, in 1787 in honor to Pythagoras. He also modeled the Freemason Society after him. Philolaus of Croton, 470 to 375 BC, was a philosopher and scientist in Greece. He was the first to move the Earth from the center of the universe and make it an orbiting planet. He and Hesychus of 400 to 335 BC claimed Earth was a sphere revolving around a central fire every 24 hours. However, the central fire proposed was not the sun. The central fire or hearth of the universe was also known as the house of Zeus, mother of gods, and goddess of the hearth, Hestia. Hestia is who the Romans worshipped as Vesta. In the Roman state, the Pontifex Maximus, also known as the emperor or pope, automatically became priest of Vesta. The women counterparts were known as Vestal virgins, chosen to be supervised by the Pontifex Maximus. To the Latins, Vesta meant staying by power, and to the Greeks, it meant standing forever. I wonder if this central fire was the biblical lake of fire. But it was Heracles around 387 to 312 BC who proposed that because Venus and Mercury varied in brilliance, it must be because both planets revolved around the sun, catching different amounts of light upon their rotation. This also explained the apparent retrograde motion of the planets. He claimed that in the geocentric view, the planets had a uniform circular orbit, not a looping retrograde. Therefore, he maintained Earth rotated daily and planets revolved around the sun, while the sun and all the planets revolved around Earth. Then Aristarchus of Samos, 310 to 230 BC, was the first to propose the sun as the center with the Earth revolving. For this reason, another Greek philosopher, Cleanthes, believed Aristarchus should be indicted for impiety for moving the Earth from the center of the universe. Doing so would produce a parallax moving the position of the stars, which has never been observed. The fixed stars remain unmoved, yet seem to move when observed from different positions. The rotation of the Earth was deemed implausible, and the geocentric model lasted 1700 years afterward. It was work by Euclid in 300 BC that would secure the branch of mathematics called geometry, the study of shapes on a solid plane. The geocentric model advanced by Hipparchus of Nicaea 190 to 120 BC until challenged by Copernicus in the 1500s. Hipparchus is called the father of scientific astronomy and trigonometry, having mapped 850 stars before the invention of the telescope. He used geometry to note astronomical motions. It was his method that Ptolemy of Alexandria advanced the geocentric theory. Claudius Ptolemy, a Roman mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, and music theorist, wrote Syntaxis Mathematica, comprising 13 books detailing the apparent stars and planetary paths. In short, he wrote the celestial realm was a sphere, and so was Earth. Earth is at the center of the cosmos and does not move. Ptolemy suggested that the supposed illusion that is apparent in heliocentrism was resolved by a fixed Earth and other bodies revolving around it. One tool used to demonstrate the motions of the heavens is the armillary sphere. So the theories bounce back and forth. Galileo had house arrest for life because he agreed with Copernicus's heliocentric cosmology of the universe. Essentially, it was determined that there is no way to know whether the Earth was still and the stars revolved, or the Earth moves and the stars are still, by mere observation. The same effect could be achieved by accelerating upward as a flat Earth with gravity pushing down on it. So check out this video. This guy does a really good job breaking down what the dilemma is from seeing the stars rotate and you being stationary, or you rotating and the stars being stationary.
What I want is I want a cylindrical room with you standing in it, and let's put you on a pair of roller skates, just to make life simple, and then I'm going to start the room rotating around its central axis. So what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is that as the room rotates, you're going to start moving around as well. But remember, unless a force is being applied to you, your natural tendency is you'll carry on in a straight line. So if you're on roller skates, then there's probably not much by way of friction, which means you'll just slide on the floor. So as the thing starts to rotate around, you'll start traveling as the thing rotates, but you'll travel on in a straight line. So you'll head off in this direction. Keep going in a straight line.
Till I whack into the wall.
And then you're going to hit the wall, and that's the interesting thing, that actually at the point where you hit the wall, suddenly you're kind of pressed against the wall as the thing rotates, and as it rotates faster and faster, you'll be pressed to the wall harder and harder. Right? And that's why people think about centrifugal forces, because actually you're being pressed to the wall. So from your perception in this rotating room, there is a centrifugal force. Right? You're being pushed outwards, and you're being pressed against the wall, and clearly there's a centrifugal force. Whereas somebody who's just watching the room from above, as we are here, will say, actually, no, there isn't a centrifugal force at all. What's going on is that you wanted to travel on in a straight line, but then this wall stopped you, and there's actually a centripetal force. The wall is pushing you towards the middle all the time. And so actually the force there is pushing you inwards. There's a centripetal force which is keeping you going around in a circle as you're pressed against the wall.
Sounds like centripetal was right then.
It is, kind of, because that's the bigger picture view when you're outside the rotating reference frame. And whereas, if you're in the rotating reference frame, then centrifugal force is what's going on, but in some sense, what's more fundamental is the rest of the universe that actually is looking down on this thing.
We do learn that for every force there's like an equal and opposite, though, so doesn't it make sense that both are happening at the same time at that point?
Indeed, by the time you're pressed to the wall, you're neither being accelerated away from the wall or towards it, so there's kind of a balance of forces there. You can think of the centrifugal force as pushing you out, with the centripetal force as pushing you inwards. It all comes to the same thing. As you said, in some sense, that centripetal force is kind of more fundamental. In the centrifugal case, you're kind of being fooled. You think you're in a non-rotating room, right? And actually, you're suddenly flung to the wall, and that's why you interpret it as a centrifugal force. And therefore, you're being fooled because although the things in the room around you don't appear to be rotating because they're all rotating at the same speed you are, somebody looking down on this from above can say, actually, the whole thing's rotating, and therefore the centripetal force is fundamentally what's going on. But that's where we get to Mach's principle, because the question you could ask is, how do you know you're rotating? How do you know it's just not the rest of the universe rotating the other way?
Scientists began putting forth experiments to prove this or that. In 1851, Foucault's pendulum was the first experiment put forth as evidence the Earth is in rotation.
A Foucault pendulum is a pendulum with a specially designed pivot, designed so that it can swing back and forth in any direction around the vertical. So that's in contrast to, for example, a grandfather clock, where the pendulum has to swing in a particular plane. Let's imagine that you have a Foucault pendulum and you're at the North Pole of the Earth. When you set the pendulum swinging, you determine a plane in which the pendulum is swinging. And that plane is fixed. So as the Earth rotates underneath the plane of the pendulum swinging. And so if you now go back and imagine that you're standing on the Earth, you see the plane of the pendulum rotate every 24 hours.
And this is the actual experiment. So they release the pendulum from high above at an angle so that it swings down in a back and forth motion. Eventually, the swing begins to knock the pins down. They believe this change in the path of the swing is due to the rotation of the Earth. Here's a fun fact. A heavy pendulum on a long, rigid wire can continue oscillating for long periods of time, but eventually air resistance will cause the motion to lessen and stop. Museums will often use an electromagnetic drive to keep the pendulum moving because such a setup provides additional energy to the pendulum without affecting its direction of motion. In 1871, Sir George Biddle Airy conducted his famous experiment.
If a telescope is pointing at a star and both are stationary, then obviously the light comes straight into the telescope. In 1729, Bradley found that he had to tip his telescope forward very slightly to get a star in the center of his telescope. It was assumed that this was due to the motion of the Earth around the Sun. Let us assume that the telescope was moving at 5 miles an hour and had to be tipped 5 degrees. This 5-degree tipping, however, could equally be caused by the ether moving at 5 miles an hour, carrying the stars around the Earth. As we see here, the light would be coming in at the same angle, and the telescope would still have to be tipped 5 degrees. So tipping the telescope does not tell us whether it is the starlight moving or the telescope moving. However, there is a simple experiment that can determine whether it was the Earth that was moving or the ether and starlight. All that you had to do was record the tipping required for any particular star, then fill the telescope with water, which greatly slows down the speed of light in the telescope. So here is the moving telescope filled with water, tipped at 5 degrees, and you can see that the starlight does not now reach the eyepiece at the bottom. This is because the starlight moves much more slowly when passing through water. However, if the telescope is tipped further, say 10 degrees, then the starlight will then be visible again in the eyepiece. It has to be tipped further because the light is now slower when in the telescope. But if the starlight is going past the telescope at 5 miles an hour, then when it is filled with water, no further tipping is needed because the light is coming in at 5 degrees anyway. The starlight stays on the same path but is only travelling slower in the water. To recap, if it is the telescope that is moving, then when it is filled with water, it has to be tipped further to see the star. If the telescope is stationary and the starlight drifting past us, then it does not have to be tipped further. In 1871, George Biddle Airy, the Astronomer Royal, performed this experiment. This is a copy from his original report. You can see that the two readings are virtually identical. If it had been the telescope that was moving, Airy expected a figure of 30 seconds of arc. In fact, he only managed to read 0.8 seconds of arc difference. Bradley first discovered stellar aberration, and it is interesting that in his report, Airy mentions that it was now about 100 seconds of arc, and that it was still slowly diminishing. This indicates that the speed of light was still decreasing in measurable amounts when Airy performed his experiment in 1871. The result of Airy's experiment, known as Airy's failure, was that the telescope does not have to be tipped further. This proved that it was the incoming light that was moving past a stationary telescope fixed to the stationary Earth.
Airy himself was a heliocentrist, setting out to prove that the star stood still, however received a nil result in detecting the Earth's motion. The experiment became known as Airy's failure. The Michelson-Morley and George Steinach experiment we've already covered. That's where they showed that light travels at the same speed, both latitudinal and north and south, an effect that could only be produced on a non-rotating plane. Steinach proved that velocity of speed of light does change when emanating from a body in motion. Einstein, after dubbing Ernest Mach's axioms Mach's principle, actually tried to explain away his bad findings by creating the theory of special relativity. Finally, aviators do not assume a round Earth. In the Journal of Navigation, pilots are taught to fly over a flat, non-rotating Earth. The government has admitted to using flat Earth non-rotating methods in order to generalize their mathematical equations. The use of a gyroscope keeps the line of sight level and the aircraft in line with the ground and the sky. Altimeters are tools used to determine elevation and altitude. If the Earth was curved, these would constantly be changing.
No, actually, the gyro is the thing that helped me, because people, you tend to think that things are affected by gravity. A gyro, and I'm not sure who's listening right now, It's we used to have the ones that little tops that you wrap a string around it, pull it like a top, and you'd spin it. The thing would stand up on your finger, and you could move it around. As long as the thing kept spinning, it would stay in the plane. And that's the whole purpose of a gyro, is it's rigid in the plane in which it starts spinning.
Right.
So if it starts spinning horizontally, that's how we get the bearings of horizon and stuff like that, because the gyro spins. The center part of it sits in a gimbal, which rotating allows the thing to free rotate. But once it starts spinning, it spins in that plane. So the point being, if it's spinning level at Charlottesville here, and then I start going west, it's going to keep trying to tell me to go straight ahead. If there were a curve, and you maintain that horizon, you just keep going up and up and up and up.
So going back to the test, we've exceeded 6 minutes now and there's no observable movement. You can still see the zero to the right of the bar in its entirety, and you still cannot see the brass flywheel from above. So how much should the gyro have precessed? What angle should the gyro's axis have moved? The calculation is the sine of the latitude times 15 degrees per hour. My current latitude is exactly 53.06 degrees north. So the angle in which the gyro should have moved in 6 minutes is 1.2 degrees. Now this doesn't sound a lot, but let's assume that Leon Foucault's experiments were performed in Paris. He should have seen even less based on his latitude. And let's not forget that he didn't have an electric motor spinning his gyro up to 9,000 RPM. So I'm just going to stop it now.
So there you have it. That's how we got to the modern day cosmology of the universe. But what do you say? After all of the experiments that you've seen and the information, are you a heliocentrist or a geocentrist? Put your answer in the comments and let us know what evidence makes you lean left or right.